It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday when the notification lit up my phone. It wasn't a drunk text from my sister Chloe. It was a formal digital service of process. I opened the attachment and felt the air leave the room. Chloe wasn't just contesting our grandfather's will. She was suing me for fiduciary negligence. She demanded the entire estate to cover the debts of her failing fashion startup. I stared at the blue light reflecting in my glasses. The audacity wasn't just insulting, it was breathtaking. Before we open the evidence file, I want to know who I'm talking to. Drop a comment with your city and the current time where you are right now. Let's see how far this story travels. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't even call our parents, Nicole and Thomas, to ask if they knew their youngest daughter had just declared war on her own flesh and blood. In my line of work, we call that a tell. If I reacted, I would be giving them data. I would be letting them know that their strike had landed, that I was hurt, that I was scrambling, and I wasn't scrambling. I walked down the hallway to my home office. It's a space Chloe hates. She calls it sterile and soulless. I call it efficient. There are no vision boards here, no inspirational quotes about manifesting your destiny. Just 3 high-defin monitors, a shredder that can chew through staples, and a server rack bolted to the floor. The air conditioning hums at a constant 68 degrees. It is cold, precise, and completely under my control. I sat in my ergonomically corrected chair and woke the screens. The blue light washed over my face, stripping away the warmth of the evening. Most people think silence is a void. They think it's an absence of action. They are wrong. Silence is a container. It is a strategic vacuum. When you don't react to an aggressor, they fill that silence with their own anxiety. They start guessing. Did she get it? Is she crying? Is she calling a lawyer? Is she coming over with a baseball bat? They project their own fears into the quiet. And while they are busy spinning out, I am busy working. I entered my 2-factor authentication code and accessed my secure personal server. I didn't have to search for the files. I didn't have to dig through old shoeboxes of receipts or scroll through thousands of emails. I had been preparing for this moment for 7 years, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself until tonight. I clicked on a folder I had created the day Chloe graduated from business school with a degree she barely earned, and a business plan written in crayon. The folder was named Project Golden Child. Inside, the subfolders were arranged chronologically: 2018, 2019, 2020. It was all there. The digital footprint of my sister's entire adult life, financed by the sister she just sued. I opened a fresh spreadsheet. I didn't feel like a sister anymore. I felt like a coroner. I was about to perform an autopsy on our relationship. I started typing date, amount, recipient, memo line. I began with the seed capital, the initial investment that was supposed to launch her luxury fashion brand. Then the rent for the loft in Soho, that she insisted was necessary for brand optics. Then the production costs for the sample line that never went into production because she didn't like the texture of the zippers. The numbers began to populate the columns. $5,000 here, $12,000 there. The emergency loan when she maxed out the company card at a club in Miami. The bridge loan when she forgot that payroll taxes were a real thing, and not just a suggestion. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. The sound was rhythmic, like a drum beat. Click, clack, click, clack. Every keystroke was a memory I had repressed. Every entry was a time I had said yes, when I should have said no. Every dollar was a piece of my own life that I had carved off and fed to her ego. I watched the total sum at the bottom of the screen climb. It moved past 50,000, past 100,000. It kept climbing. Anger is a volatile fuel. It burns hot and fast, and it makes you sloppy. I wasn't angry. I was calculating. I was building a wall brick by brick, receipt by receipt. They wanted a fight about feelings. They wanted to talk about emotional distress and family obligation. Fine, we could talk about that. But first we were going to talk about the math. I worked through the night. I didn't feel tired. I felt a cold, terrifying clarity. By the time the sun started to bleed through the blinds, I had the first draft of the timeline. It wasn't just a list of debts. It was a map of their entitlement, and my complicity. I saved the file. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the phone that was still silent on my desk. I hadn't sent a single text. I hadn't made a single sound. Let them think I'm weak. Let them think I'm scared. Let them think I'm just the quiet, boring auditor who writes the checks and cleans up the messes. They were about to learn the difference between a checkbook and a ledger. One is for spending. The other is for judgment. And court was now in session. The cursor blinked in the first cell of the spreadsheet 2017, the year it all started. I typed in the first major figure, $45,000. Memo line, seed capital. I closed my eyes and the memory washed over me. Not as a hazy nostalgic film, but with the sharp high-definition clarity of a crime scene photo. We were in our parents' living room. Chloe was standing in front of the fireplace, pitching her vision. She didn't have a business plan. She had a mood board. It was covered in fabric swatches, magazine cutouts of Paris Fashion Week, and photos of influencers she wanted to be friends with. "It's not just clothing," she had said, her voice breathless with the kind of confidence that only exists in people who have never had to pay their own rent. "It's a movement. It's eco-conscious luxury for the digital nomad." My mother, Nicole, was beaming. My father, Thomas, was nodding as if he were listening to Steve Jobs unveil the iPhone. They looked at me. They didn't have the liquidity to fund a startup. They had leveraged themselves to the hilt to keep up appearances at the country club. But I had a signing bonus. I had savings. I had the steady, boring job at the firm. "Jasmine," my mother had said, resting a hand on my arm. The smell of her perfume, something floral and expensive that masked the scent of their impending insolvency, was suffocating. "You have the resources. Invest in your sister. She's going to be the next big thing. Don't be so stingy." Stingy. That was their favorite word for me. I typed in the next entry. $6,500. Memo line. Soho Loft Security Deposit. Chloe insisted she couldn't design in Queens. She needed the energy of downtown. I remembered visiting that loft. It was filled with samples of vegan leather that she had discarded because the hand feel wasn't buttery enough. Thousands of dollars of material piled in the corner like trash. I was eating meal-prepped rice and beans out of Tupperware containers for lunch every day to rebuild my savings, while she was ordering $20 salads and complaining about the lighting in her studio. When I tried to bring up her burn rate, my father scoffed. "You're obsessed with money, Jasmine. You need to look at the big picture. Chloe is a visionary. You can't put a price tag on creativity, but you can." I was looking at it right now. I scrolled down to 2019, the year of the pop-up shop in the Hamptons. $12,000 for a weekend rental. 0 sales. She blamed the weather. She blamed the location. She blamed me for bad energy. Grandpa George had been there that weekend. I remembered him sitting in the corner of the empty pop-up shop, his hands resting on his cane. He didn't say a word while Chloe threw a tantrum about the lack of foot traffic. He just watched. He watched her scream at the caterers. He watched my parents soothe her ego, and then he looked at me standing by the register that hadn't opened once. He tapped his cane on the floor. Tap, tap, tap. It was a code, a rhythmic acknowledgement of the reality we were both seeing. He knew I wasn't the stingy sister. He knew I was the involuntary angel investor in a company that manufactured nothing but delusion. I entered the final total for 2021, the rebranding phase. Another $18,000 gone. By the time I reached the bottom of the spreadsheet, the sum was staggering. $280,000. That wasn't just money. That was a house. That was a retirement fund. That was my freedom, siphoned off month by month to subsidize a lifestyle I wasn't even invited to enjoy. I looked at the number. It stared back cold and undeniable. They called me obsessive. They called me jealous. But math doesn't have emotions. Math doesn't have favorites. And math was about to be the only thing that mattered. I saved the spreadsheet. Step 1 was complete. I had the history. Now I needed the present. I needed to know exactly what they were planning to do to me so I could make sure they regretted every single syllable. I closed the seed capital tab and opened a new document. It was time to prepare for the ambush. 2 days later, my phone vibrated with a message from Nicole. "We need to talk. Family meeting tonight. 7:00 p.m. Chloe is very upset. I almost laughed. Very upset. That was their code for Chloe wants something and isn't getting it fast enough. I arrived precisely at 7. I didn't bring a casserole or a bottle of wine. I brought a black leather portfolio containing a single printed document, a summary of the lawsuit Chloe had filed against me. The living room looked exactly the same as it had in my memories. Plush beige carpets, oversized abstract art that cost more than my first car, and the lingering scent of expensive candles. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow like a shield. She had set up a literal vision board on the coffee table. It was covered in pictures of European villas, private jets, and magazine cutouts of Forbes 30 under 30. Nicole and Thomas sat on either side of her, flanking her like bodyguards. Jasmine, my mother started, her voice tight. We need to settle this. Chloe is devastated. You can't just cut her off like this. It's cruel. I didn't cut her off, I said, remaining standing. She sued me. That tends to put a damper on the relationship. I had to. Chloe burst out, tears welling up in her eyes on cue. You ruined everything. You stopped the transfers. My vendors are calling me. I have a vision, Jasmine. I have a destiny, and you're sabotaging it because you're jealous. Jealous? There it was. The favorite accusation of the narcissist. I'm not jealous, Chloe, I said, my voice flat. I'm broke. Or rather, I was broke because I spent 7 years funding your destiny. But the bank is closed. You have a salary, Nicole interjected, as if that explained everything. You have a steady job. Chloe is an artist. She needs support. You can absorb the loss. It's just money to you. To her, it's her soul. It's not just money, I corrected. It's my life. It's my retirement. It's the house I never bought. It's the vacations I never took. Chloe pointed a manicured finger at the vision board. Look at this. This is what I'm building. This is the future of our family. And you want to destroy it over some accounting error? It's not an accounting error, I said. It's $280,000. And now you want Grandpa's estate too. Grandpa wanted me to have it. Chloe screamed. He knew I was special. He knew I needed it to launch. You manipulated him. You poisoned him against me? I looked at her. Really looked at her. Her face was twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. It wasn't the rage of someone who had been wronged. It was the rage of someone who believed they were owed the world and was furious that the delivery was late. This wasn't gratitude. This wasn't love. This was a transaction. And in her mind, I had defaulted on my debt to her. I'm not dropping the lawsuit, Chloe hissed. I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to go on social media and tell everyone what a toxic, abusive, jealous sister you are. I have followers, Jasmine. I have a platform. I will destroy your professional reputation. The room went silent. My parents didn't scold her. They didn't tell her that was too far. They just looked at me, waiting for me to fold, waiting for me to apologize and write the check, just like I always did. But the auditor in me was already calculating the risk. The threat to my reputation was real, but the threat to my self-respect was greater. I looked at the vision board one last time. It was a collage of delusions. Do it, I said. Chloe blinked. What? Do it, I repeated. Post whatever you want. But before you do, you might want to check your own books. Because unlike you, I kept receipts. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently with a definitive click. I walked to my car, the cool night air filling my lungs. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. They thought they had ambushed me. They thought they had scared me, but all they had done was confirm the diagnosis. The patient was terminal. It was time to pull the plug. I drove home in silence, plotting the next move. They wanted a war. Fine. I would give them a war, but I wouldn't fight it with social media posts or vision boards. I would fight it with the law. And I would start by auditing the one thing they thought was untouchable, their own lies. I didn't go home to cry. I didn't go home to drink a bottle of wine and wonder why my family didn't love me. I went home to hire a shark. The next morning, I walked into the office of Sterling and Vance. They don't handle amicable divorces or custody mediations. They handle high-stakes corporate litigation and hostile takeovers. I sat across from a man named Robert, whose suit costs more than Chloe's entire spring collection. I didn't tell him my sister was mean to me. I told him I was the target of a fraudulent claim regarding an estate, and I wanted to counter-sue for misappropriation of funds. "This is a nuclear option," Robert said, looking over the summary I had prepared. "If we file this, there is no Thanksgiving dinner this year." "I don't like turkey anyway," I said. "File it." We stopped treating this like a family dispute. We treated it like a corporate audit. I spent the next 72 hours finalizing what I called the audit trail. It wasn't just a digital file anymore. I went to a professional print shop. I had the emails, the bank statements, the text messages, and the loan documents printed on high-quality bond paper. I had it bound in black leather with gold lettering on the spine. Forensic accounting of financial support provided to Chloe Miller, 2017 to 2024. It was 312 pages thick. It weighed 4 lb. It felt heavy in my hands. Like a weapon. But I didn't stop with Chloe. My parents had flanked her. They had enabled her. They had watched me bleed my savings dry, and called it support. Now they were collateral damage. Robert suggested a request for admission. It is a beautiful, terrible legal tool. It forces the opposing party to admit or deny specific facts under oath. If they deny a fact that is later proven true, they can be sanctioned. If they admit it, the fact is established as law. I drafted the questions for Nicole and Thomas myself. Admit that between January 2021 and December 2023, you did not make a single mortgage payment on the family residence. Admit that the funds for said mortgage payments were transferred directly from the account of Jasmine Miller. Admit that you have no promissory note indicating these payments were a gift. It was a trap. A perfect logical cage. If they admitted it, they acknowledged they owed me over $100,000 in housing costs. If they denied it, I would produce the bank records, and they would be committing perjury. I signed the paperwork with a steady hand. I looked at the signature Jasmine Miller. It looked different than it had a week ago. The loops were sharper. The pressure was harder. The sister in me died in that living room when they threatened my reputation. The woman who walked out of the law office wasn't a sister or a daughter or a stingy killjoy. The auditor had taken the wheel, and the auditor doesn't care about feelings. The auditor only cares about the truth. I had the courier service deliver the heavy black binder and the legal notices to my parents' house at dinner time. I wanted to interrupt their meal. I wanted to ruin their appetite. The war had moved from the living room to the courtroom, and I had just brought a tank to a knife fight. The discovery phase is usually boring. It's boxes of tax returns, emails about dinner plans, and passive-aggressive text messages. But not this time. This time, it was a treasure hunt. Robert and I were in the conference room at the firm, surrounded by boxes of Grandpa George's personal files. Chloe's lawyers had demanded full disclosure of our grandfather's estate records, hoping to find evidence that I had coerced him into changing his will. What they didn't realize was that Grandpa George was a retired judge. He didn't just keep records. He kept evidence. I was going through a box labeled 2019 miscellaneous when I found it. It wasn't a secret will. It wasn't a hidden bank account. It was a single sheet of paper folded in thirds tucked inside a manila folder labeled Chloe Business. I unfolded it. At the top in bold letters, promissory note. I, Chloe Miller, promised to pay George Miller the sum of $50,000. It was signed, dated, notarized, and across the front in Grandpa's distinct shaky handwriting was a single word written in red ink. Void. My heart hammered against my ribs. Void. Why void? Had he forgiven the debt? Had he decided to gift it to her after all? I flipped the page. Stapled to the back was a handwritten note from Grandpa. Loan voided due to breach of contract. Funds were not used for business inventory as agreed. Funds were used to purchase personal vehicle Range Rover. Trust amended to prevent further access. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. Grandpa knew. He had known for years. He hadn't just cut Chloe out because he liked me better. He had cut her out because she had stolen from him. Robert, I said, my voice steady. Look at this. He came over and read the document. A slow, shark-like smile spread across his face. "Well," he said, "that changes the narrative. But we weren't done." The audit trail I had compiled was comprehensive, but it lacked one crucial element: the why. Why was Chloe so desperate? Why was she suing for the estate now when her brand was supposedly thriving? I went back to the financial records. I started cross-referencing Chloe's company expenses with public filings. I pulled up the SEC database. I searched for Chloe Miller Designs. Nothing. Then I searched for the holding company listed on her invoices. Miller Vance Holdings. There it was. A form de filing, notice of exempt offering of securities. I clicked on the document. My eyes scanned the names of the executive officers. Chloe Miller, CEO, and they are listed as Chief Financial Officer. Silent partner, Jasmine Miller. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table. I wasn't an officer. I wasn't a partner. I had never signed a single piece of paper for her company. I looked at the signature on the digital filing. It was a clumsy forgery of my own signature, the old one, the one with the soft loops I used before I became an auditor. Chloe hadn't just borrowed money. She hadn't just wasted my savings. She had used my name, my credentials, my professional license to solicit investors. She had raised over $1 million from private equity investors by claiming that a certified forensic auditor was overseeing the books. This wasn't just a family dispute. This wasn't even civil fraud. This was federal securities fraud. I looked at Robert. He was already on his phone, likely calling a forensic handwriting expert. "Grandpa tried to protect her," I whispered. "That's why he voided the loan. That's why he locked the trust. He wasn't punishing her. He was trying to stop her before she went to prison." "Sometimes you lock the door to keep the thief out," I said, remembering something Grandpa had told me years ago. "Sometimes you lock it to keep the child in." Chloe had broken the lock, and now she was going to have to face the wolves she had invited in. I closed the file. The sadness I had felt for my sister, the lingering, pathetic hope that maybe she was just misguided, evaporated. It was replaced by the cold, hard resolve of the auditor. She had forged my name. She had risked my license. She had risked my freedom. The time for protection was over. It was time for the truth. We were in the conference room of a neutral law firm. It was the only way to get Chloe to show up. She thought it was a settlement negotiation. She thought I was going to offer her a percentage of the estate to make the lawsuit go away. Nicole and Thomas were there looking anxious but hopeful. Chloe was wearing a power suit that cost more than my first car, looking bored and irritated. Her lawyer, a man who looked like he specialized in parking tickets, was scrolling on his phone. "Let's make this quick," Chloe said, checking her nails. "I have a meeting with Vogue in an hour." "There is no meeting with Vogue," I said, placing the heavy black binder on the mahogany table. The thud echoed in the silence. "What is that?" my father asked, eyeing the binder wearily. "This," I said, resting my hand on the cover, "is the end of the road." I opened the binder to page 42. Let's start with the basics. Business expense: $15,000 for a market research trip to Tulum. I looked at Chloe. "Interestingly, your Instagram feed from that week shows you at a bachelorette party for your friend Sarah." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Networking happens everywhere, Jasmine. You wouldn't understand." I flipped to page 89. Office rent $3,500 a month paid to THM Consulting. "That's funny, Dad. Isn't that the shell company you use for your country club membership?" Thomas went pale. "Now wait a minute. I'm not done," I said, my voice cutting through his protest. I turned to the final section, the kill shot. "This," I said, sliding the copy of the for.D filing across the table, "is a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission." Chloe glanced at it and shrugged. "So, we're raising capital. That's what successful companies do. And this," I said, pointing to the signature line, "is my signature. Or rather, a forgery of my signature." The room went dead silent. The hum of the air conditioning suddenly sounded like a jet engine. "I never signed this," I said, looking directly at my sister. "I never agreed to be your CFO. I never agreed to be a silent partner. And I certainly never agreed to verify your financials to private equity investors." Chloe's lawyer finally looked up from his phone. He snatched the paper, read it, and then looked at his client with horror. Is this true? Chloe tried to laugh it off. It was just a placeholder. Jasmine was going to sign it eventually. We just needed to get the filing in before the deadline. That's securities fraud, her lawyer whispered. That's federal prison. Chloe's smug mask finally cracked. You wouldn't, she whispered, looking at me. I'm your sister. You sued me, I reminded her. You tried to destroy my reputation. You stole my identity to commit a felony. I closed the binder. Here are your options. Option A. You drop the lawsuit immediately. You sign a permanent NDA, stating you will never speak about me or Grandpa's estate again. You dissolve your company and refund the investors what's left of their money. And option B? Nicole asked, her voice trembling. Option B, I said, standing up. I walk out of here and I mail this binder to the SEC and the IRS. Chloe looked at our parents. She looked for the bailout. She looked for the excuse, but there was none. The math was absolute. The evidence was overwhelming. You can't do this, she sobbed. You're ruining my life. I didn't ruin your life, I said. I just audited it. Chloe slumped in her chair. She looked small. The visionary was gone. All that was left was a scared child who had finally been told no. Sign the papers, I told her lawyer. You have 1 hour. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt lighter. The weight of their expectations, their entitlement, their chaos, it was gone. I had balanced the ledger. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't in the red. I sold Grandpa's brownstone 3 months later. I didn't even put a for.Day sign out front. I sold it to a quiet family who promised to keep the garden exactly as it was. The proceeds cleared my debts, refilled my retirement account, and left me with enough to buy a small modern condo in a different part of the city, a place nobody knew about. A place with a security system only I could access. I blocked their numbers, not out of anger, but out of efficiency. An auditor doesn't keep open files on closed cases. Sometimes late at night, I think about the sunk cost fallacy. In economics, it's the idea that you should continue investing in a losing proposition because of what you've already put into it. It's why people stay in bad marriages, fix lemon cars, and keep funding family members who drain them dry. They think if they just give a little more, they'll finally get a return on their investment. They'll finally get the love, the gratitude, the acknowledgement they paid for, but that's a lie. People aren't stocks. They don't rebound just because you hold on to them. Sometimes the only way to save your portfolio is to sell at a loss and walk away. I sat on my new balcony, looking out at the city lights. My phone was silent. My email was empty. My bank account was full. I opened my laptop one last time. I navigated to the Project Golden Child folder. I hovered over the delete button. Then I stopped. I didn't delete it. I moved it to an external hard drive, encrypted it, and put it in my safe. An auditor never destroys evidence. You never know when you might need to remind someone of the cost of their freedom. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I looked tired, but calm. The audit was complete. The books were balanced. And for the first time in my life, the ledger was closed. If you've ever realized your family was a bad investment, share this story. You're not alone.